Today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 best exercises for your legs, and I'm going to give you a couple that are absolutely useless. Now we're talking about building leg strength. For the vast majority of people, building strength and building size is the same thing. So if you're looking to build strength or size, this is probably the right place for you unless you're advanced. Now you can look at my interview with Mike Israetel. We'll put that in the end credits. But without further ado, let's get on to the 5 best exercises for your legs. And in my opinion, the 2 common ones that are the worst. Coming in at number 5 are split squats. Now, split squats are going to be lower load than something like a barbell squat, but anytime we take one leg away and we focus on a single leg movement, we are building disproportionate hip strength. Now, not just hip strength in terms of glute maximus, but hip strength in terms of all of the internal smaller muscles in your hip. The degrees of freedom of your hip are actually quite large. We have the ball and socket joints, the femur into the pelvis, and that's what we normally think of the hip. But one of the really important functions of the glutes and the smaller muscles, the glute medius, things like the piriformis, they contribute to external rotation of the femur, pulling your knees out. That gets a lot of attention, but they also contribute to lateral stability of the pelvis. If these muscles aren't strong, anytime you're moving, you're going to have your pelvis rocking side to side. When it does that, it puts a huge demand on your core, and people actually don't appreciate that the strength of these smaller internal muscles of your hip can support the core in a dramatic way, to the point where I believe it's a valid argument to say hip strength is part of the core. And the best way to strengthen your hips is to go to a single leg movement like a split squat. Now, personally, I don't think split squat or Bulgarian split squat makes a huge amount of difference, but what is very important is that you are not deloading one of your legs. They have to be working the whole time. And this brings me to my first bad exercise for building strength for your legs, and this is walking lunges. This might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but when we compare walking lunges to a split squat, every time you bring your leg up and through, you're giving that leg a rest. And when you give it a rest, obviously you're going to get a lower return for time. Now, you could double the volume, sure, but then we get to how much total systemic load are we putting on ourselves versus the return we're getting specifically. We can get a really good return and really good hip strength by doing split squats or Bulgarian split squats without the downsides of the rest times with walking lunges. With walking lunges as well, you can arrange yourself in a way where you're stepping almost on a tightrope. And if you step on a tightrope, your hip is going to be outside of that foot, and it's going to put your hip musculature, the smaller muscles in your hip that I'm talking about strengthening, in a more advantaged position. This is because they're lengthened, and when they're lengthened, we have natural mechanisms in our body that want to fight to shorten them. We want to exist in homeostasis. So this isn't going to translate very well to anything that's not walking a tightrope. When you're doing your split squats, your static split squats, the one thing you should look at is not necessarily the angle from your femur to your tibia or your knee angle. We should be looking at the angle from your knee to your ankle. If that starts to collapse, that becomes a problem. Now, we should have a relatively straight line if you're a man, from your ankle to your knee to your hip. And I say for a man because naturally, genetically, women's hips are wider. But the important thing is that you don't open your hips up. If your right leg is forward, you have to make sure that your hips stay forward and your left hip stays forward. That is actually one of the best cues in a split squat, is to keep your back leg hip forward. That's going to make sure the load is on the correct muscles of the hip, of the foot that's in front of you. This is something that's very, very hard to control if you're doing walking lunges.
This video is brought to you by Lift Heavy Be Kind apparel. From sweatshirts to muscle shirts to shorts to gym bags, we have virtually everything that you need for your gym experience while welcoming people into the gym. We were established in 2022, and since then, we've given away nearly $25,000 to different causes in the fitness community. If you want to support the channel and support a good cause, go ahead, check out the YouTube shop or the link in the description. Let's get back to the video.
Now, number 4 on the 5 best leg exercises are deadlifts. Now, this is not in the top 3, and this might surprise some people, but deadlifts are disproportionately strengthening the posterior chain. There also is a lot of other muscles involved during a deadlift, not just your legs, but also your spinal erectors, your upper back, your thoracic vertebrae, your core, and for the vast majority of people, the weak link in the chain is actually going to be your core, not necessarily your legs. So I believe this is a great closed chain hamstring exercise. Might not be the best exercise if you're looking to strengthen your legs specifically. Now, I will throw a caveat on this whole list. We are talking about strengthening a body part. I'm not saying throw out walking lunges or throw out or definitely include deadlifts. Or deadlift shouldn't be in the top 3 if you're trying to be a great strongman or a great strength athlete, because they definitely should be. But we're talking about if you've identified your legs as a weak link in the chain, Deadlifts, in my opinion, should not be one of the top 3 exercises that you should go to. Fun fact about deadlifts, they are actually one of the top 3 exercises to strengthen your core. In fact, they are number 2, only to squats. So enough with your dead bugs, enough with your planking, enough with your leg raises, etc., etc. If you want a strong core, do your deadlifts, do your squats, and wear a belt, because that's going to increase the amount of core activation. Coming in at number 3 are traditional barbell squats. Now, small caveat on this, small correction on this, not any barbell squat, but a close stance, high bar barbell squat. The reason for the close stance is that the closer your feet are, the more your knees are going to track forward and the more upright your torso is going to stay. The more upright your torso stays, the less load we put on the spinal erectors, the more load we're putting onto the quads. There's actually a substantial amount of effort that goes through your calves as well, and you're never going to get away from working your hamstrings and glutes if you squat deep. Now, deep is relative to a person. If you're quite large, if you have muscular legs like myself, your hamstrings run into your calves, so you can't go necessarily ass to grass, but as deep as you can comfortably go without compromising your technique. This is going to make sure you get a stretch on the glutes, your quads are stretched, and you're going to have some significant leg development. If we talk about bringing the legs out and pointing the toes out, we're going to start to abduct the legs or bring the legs away from the body more. This introduces hamstrings to a greater extent, groin to a greater extent, and all of your adductors, which is all good for strengthening your legs, of course. But we also introduce a substantial amount of low back because we're going to get a forward lean. This is going to certainly add more weight to the movement, but it's going to add more weight because we're adding in muscles where we aren't specifically targeting the legs anymore. So high bar close stance squats are number 3. Before we get to the top 2, my next exercise that I believe should be thrown away if you're looking to strengthen your leg are safety squat bar squats. Now, again, controversial, just like walking lunges, and I appreciate that, but safety bar squats, if you do them heavy, and anyone who does them heavy will admit, the number 1 difficulty is in not collapsing your torso and not having your sternum pointing down towards the ground. This means that if we're creating a weak link in the chain of our thoracic vertebrae, our legs are naturally not going to take as much of that load. We need our legs to be close to failure or as close as possible in a safe manner to be able to make steady progress here. With the safety squat bar, it is a phenomenal exercise for a lot of reasons, but most of those reasons have to do with thoracic strength, thoracic stiffness, and that will translate over really well to things like your push pressing, overhead pressing, even things like your deadlift and your bench press, but it's not a great exercise if you're purely trying to strengthen your legs. Now, coming in at number 2 of my best leg strengthening exercises, I have hack squats. We lose a lot of degrees of freedom here, but that's okay. We're okay losing degrees of freedom because that helps us focus on a particular movement pattern. You can work harder when we don't have the issue of any sort of planar movement, rotational, in a rotational sense. We don't have any movements left to right. We don't have any, I'm trying to put this into lay terms, but we don't have any movement in the frontal plane. We don't have any movement in the transverse plane. We only have movement up and down while we're squatting. And based on where you put your feet, you can make sure that you're hitting your legs effectively. And you can, in this case, work more quads by going closer stance and putting your feet further back, which is going to cause more knee flexion. Or you can put your feet further forward and slightly wider to be able to have more of a hamstring balanced, glute balanced squat. You can still run into the same problems as the traditional barbell squat. If you start to widen your legs, you can start to fold forward more. But if you face out on the hack squat and you keep your back against the machine, the only thing that you can use is your legs, and that's what we're looking to strengthen. It also simulates a squat as close as possible, and simulating a squat is going to simulate your overhead press, simulate your moving events, and it's going to make you stronger all around. My number 1 exercise for leg press, sorry Ian, you're going to have to cut that a little bit. My number 1 exercise for leg strength is, pop it in the comments, your guess. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to do that. Pause the video if you have to. 4, 3, 2, 1, and it is the leg press. Far and away, I believe this is the best way to strengthen your legs, to the point where it's so effective that someone like myself, when you reach a very high level of strength, we actually have to be careful on leg press because it's easy for us to pull muscles off of the bone during leg press. That's how specifically they can work on your legs. Now, depending on where you put your feet, there's no way that you're going to hinge over or use your back because your butt and your back have to stay on the pad of the leg press to do this safely. So you can go hamstrings and glutes by going wide and high. You can go quads by going narrow and low, or any combination in between. This makes it an incredible movement for strengthening your legs all in all. Now, I would love to know your guys' thoughts. What do you think are the best exercises to strengthen your legs? Is this something where I've hit the mark? Personally, I believe, the strongest legs in strongman. That is where all of my power comes from. That is where I win most of the competitions. I mean, you see, it's not necessarily coming from massive biceps or massive shoulders like the other guys might have, but I make up for it in droves with my leg strength. And these are the pinnacles that I use in order to achieve that. Now, put your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please go ahead and do that. And as per usual, lift heavy, be kind. The merch link is in the description, and the programming, if you want to become the strongest version of yourself, is linked in the description and in the pinned comments. Appreciate your guys' support massively. It is amazing where the YouTube channel has gone. I want to keep giving this information to you guys. Always put your recommendations for videos in the future in the comments. If you have nothing else to say, leave a little moose dropping down there. And until next time, lift heavy, be kind, and we will catch you tomorrow.